My name is Monie Captan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Challenge Account-Liberia. The Millennium Challenge Compact is a program that the U.S. government basically sponsors around the world. It is intended to identify countries that are basically developing poor countries that are well managed. And those countries have to pass certain test scorecards to show that there's good governance in those countries. And then they are rewarded by the provision of a significant grant that is intended to promote economic growth in the country. So Liberia, throughout the past years, have worked very hard to qualify to pass the scorecard, and that governance scorecard has to do with issues involving political freedoms, economic freedoms, the kind of social services you offer, transparency, the fight against corruption, and so forth. And Liberia did meet the minimum requirements of the scorecard, and as a result became a country that qualified for this grant under the U.S. Millennium Challenge Program. A country before it can begin the implementation of a grant or even sign a grant agreement, one of the requirements is that that country has to undertake an economic constraints analysis. The economic constraints analysis informs on the principal binding constraints to economic growth. And what the compact seeks to do is to, once you've identified those constraints, to help alleviate or mitigate those constraints so that you can open up economic growth. So when we undertook the economic constraints analysis for Liberia, our findings were that the two binding constraints to economic growth and investment in Liberia had to do specifically with the infrastructure related to electricity and roads. And so that became the focus of the Liberia Compact. First of all, I think the Compact has as a very clear objective providing accessible and reliable, affordable electricity to the country. And this is necessary for economic activity. If you don't have affordable electricity and adequate electricity, you cannot engage in many economic activities, and it makes your ability to compete economically more difficult. So one of the things that we've already started to benefit from is an increase in the supply of electricity and a decrease in the cost of electricity. We started, I think our baseline data showed that the electricity tariff was somewhere around 59 cents and is now dropped to as low as 35 cents per kilowatt hour. That is quite significant. The road project, although it hasn't really started in terms of the kind of implementation that will see results, but the intent of that is to reduce the cost of transportation and to improve accessibility throughout the country through maintaining the road network. The Millennium Challenge account is governed by a board of directors. Most of those directors are members of the government. They hold cabinet positions, and in the absence of the appointment of ministers, it has been quite challenging taking decisions that require board approval. So it's in a way delayed some of the activities that we should have undertaken, but we hope that as the government proceeds to fill in all of the vacancies in government, that we will have a fully constituted board soon enough to be able to then proceed with implementation of the compact in areas that require board approval. Well, the MCA is a special purpose vehicle established by an act of the Liberian Legislature, and the purpose of it is to serve as an accountable entity for the implementation of the compact. So MCA-Liberia, which is responsible for implementation of the compact, has a board of directors and a management team. I head the management team, and the board of directors is chaired by the Minister of Finance and Development Planning. MCC also has a representative on that board as well. Together, the board and the management team takes responsibility for implementation of the compact. The board has to approve, and in most circumstances, MCC has a right of no objection on several critical documents, and that includes, for instance, our quarterly disbursement requests, which is basically how our procurement and budget functions. Our procurement plans, all of our procurement plans have to be approved by the board and by MCC. Contracts that we signed at certain levels require MCC no objection. And then on the administrative level, MCA outsources its fiscal and procurement functions. So the activities regarding procurement are managed by external contractor, an international firm, and also our fiscal activities are managed by an external firm. This is quite standard in the way MCAs around the world are established, so this is nothing quite new to Liberia. It limits the risk and exposures to corruption, to issues that could go around fraud, and it improves the level of transparency and accountability in terms of how MCC funds are managed. The compact, or let me say the grant that is given by the US government, is basically an amount that has been approved that can be spent on projects under the compact in Liberia. No funds are physically transferred into, the funds are not physically transferred into an account that sits in Liberia and then we're spending it, no. Every quarter we have to submit a request to MCC, and that request, of course, is approved by the board of directors. That request includes several components. First of all, it includes a budget of how much we want to spend. It includes a procurement plan in terms of the methodology that we intend to utilize for procurement. It includes a narrative in terms of what are the objectives and what we hope to achieve with the expenditures and the projects that they're related to. It includes a condition precedent report. Before we can access funds and spend funds, and before MCC can release funds to MCA, there are certain conditions that have to be met. And so we have to submit a report in terms of where we fare, how we fare, in terms of meeting those conditionalities that are set within the compact. And so there is a report specifically for that. There is also a report where we track, we call that the indicator tracking table, where we track data in terms of implementation, and we know exactly what we've achieved, what we've not achieved, where we're back, and so forth. And the final objective is, in addition to monitoring, to evaluate the projects that we implement. So there are quite a number of packages that come together to form. There are also certifications that are signed, attestations by the procurement agent and the fiscal agent to ensure that there's compliance with the terms of the compact. So, and this is done every quarter. So, and funds are released on a quarterly basis. So, if you look at the 5 years, that's 20 quarters that the compact includes. And so you can imagine the compact being dispersed in 20 different buckets, for instance. And this is how it's done. And in most cases, remittances and payments under the compact are done directly through the U.S. Treasury Department to contractors that have been approved and works done. And of course, all of the contractors that we work with must be cleared by certain agencies, including the World Bank Department list and the U.S. MCC list as well. So we cannot just hire any company to do work for us. They have to be free of, for instance, fraud or sanctions or other related charges that might be associated with them. So we operate under very strict conditions. This is the first time the MCA or the Liberian team is doing this. It's not something that you can say, oh, I have experience, I've managed a compact before. Every country, this is their first time doing it, and so the first time you do something, there's a learning curve that you have to go through. And so the level of efficiency we expect where someone has done this quite often is not there. A lot of people have to learn as they go along. It's a learning process, and we have a limited, I think the biggest challenge is we have a limited time frame. It's 5 years. If we have to be able to absorb the grant within a 5-year period. And the processes involved in implementing the projects can be quite cumbersome. For instance, the procurement processes are long. You cannot take shortcuts. You have to follow them. There are a lot of reporting, there are accountability, there are requirements that you have to fulfill that includes ensuring that there's gender integration, inclusion in your projects. There are economic, environmental and social performance standards that you have to adhere to. Projects have to be managed in a very sustainable manner. And so there's quite a lot of factors that come into a project, and it's not as simple as it may seem on paper. For instance, if you're executing a project that involves building a training center for LEC, for instance. There's so many things we have to go through. We have to select the site, we have to go through an environmental social impact assessment of the site, we have to get permits, we have to have a gender-based program for that, we have to have a procurement plan, we have to go through a process of procurement that can take quite a long time. There are opportunities for challenges to the results of procurement evaluations and so forth. So there are quite a lot of factors involved, and with limited time, I think that is our major challenge. Another challenge might be the fact that maybe some of the projects you have to undertake, they're not easily available contractors in the country that have some of the skills that you require for projects that need to be implemented. And so you have to bring people from outside of the country to be able to implement some aspects of the projects that you face. But overall, I think the biggest challenge really is the time constraint that we have to work within. Well, what I like to say is that development is not an ad hoc activity. If you want development to have impact, if you want the money you invest in development projects to have the impact that can change the quality of life of your people, planning is extremely important. Monitoring of the implementation process, evaluating it, ensuring that the results that you want are achieved, those are critical. It's not just about starting a project and spending the money to do it. You have to plan it well. You have to ensure that it's viable, that it's feasible, that it can be achieved, that it can be sustained, and that it can give you the outcome that you plan for. So I would just want to say that I hope that our development program is one that involves critical planning to ensure success.